Section 1. You will hear a student talking to the study abroad coordinator at her university. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. You will see that there is an example, which has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hi, Leela. Please sit down. So you were interested in studying abroad next year, right?
Yes, that's right. I've always wanted to live and to study in South America.
Okay, well, I have to go over a few things with you first, Leela. Once I get some information, I can tell you about studying abroad. What is your last name?
Kim, that's K-I-M-H.
Corbin asked Leela for her last name, Kim, so this has been written in the notes. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hi, Leela. Please sit down. So you were interested in studying abroad next year, right?
Yes, that's right. I've always wanted to live and study in South America.
Okay, well, I have to go over a few things with you first, Leela. Once I get some information, I can tell you about studying abroad. What is your last name?
Kim, that's K-I-M-H.
Okay, now, when are you interested in studying abroad?
I want to study my entire third year of university abroad.
Wow, that's a long while, but well worth it. Have you ever lived or studied abroad before?
Yes, I took a summer language program in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Will you be applying for financial aid for your year abroad?
I think I will be. Living costs are lower in South America, but plane tickets can be very expensive.
What kind of degree do you want?
I plan to obtain a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish and Latin American history. I'm especially interested in how countries there became democracies.
That sounds very interesting. Do you have any idea what countries you want to study in?
I think I'll do 1 semester in Bolivia and then another semester in Peru.
That's all the basic information I need.
Just ask if you need anything else.
Before you hear the rest of the dialogue, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Now, Leela, there are some things I have to explain to you about going abroad for a year. You know that it can be difficult at times.
Yes, actually, I had a friend who went to China for just a semester. She said the language barrier was quite a problem.
Actually, not only is there a language barrier, there are also cultural differences that can make living or studying in another country very difficult. You mentioned going abroad before, but over the course of a year, some people can experience severe loneliness.
I think I'm prepared to deal with that.
Also, you have to be organized when it comes to applying for your study abroad program. Our university here may not accept every course you take abroad. You have to make sure with your academic advisor about which ones are appropriate and will count towards your degree.
Understood. Thanks for the advice. Actually, I did want to go over the application procedure briefly with you. I read it on the website, but...
Yes, it can be slightly confusing. First of all, please remember to keep your grade point average at 3.2 or above. There are high standards for those sponsored by the school to study in another country. Once you have declared your major, you can begin your research into which programs you want to go to. After filling out the appropriate application, you will submit them to the Office of Study Abroad. After they review your materials, you will be informed about whether or not you can study abroad under the university's name. You will also be informed about how much financial aid you will receive.
Sounds slightly daunting.
Well, from what I have seen, I don't think you need to worry.
Okay then, I'll print the forms from the online website now and get started.
Good luck, Leela.
Thank you so much.
No problem. If you have any other questions, please email or call.
I will. Bye then.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Hello, everyone. As new and answer questions 11 to 17. Hello, everyone. As new students, having just arrived, it is important that you are conversant with some of the aspects of living safely here. Let me immediately say that, in contrast to the high crime rate in other cities, ours is very low. Nevertheless, there is some advice that would be considered prudent in even the safest of places. It is therefore in your interest to look at this map of the city and familiarise yourself with its areas, some of which may not be as safe as others, particularly at night. A little research now in this respect will obviously help you a great deal. For this reason, we have provided a variety of brochures and information leaflets which we encourage you to take and read. In addition, you should talk to people you know, to your homestay parents and teachers, and get a feel for the situation both in the neighbourhood where you live and the city at large. Now, you should know about the police presence in this city. There are local police stations in every suburb, but not all of these are open 24 hours a day. For that, you need a main station, of which there are many, and you should familiarise yourself as to the location of the one nearest to you. Moving on, many of you might like to go out at night. So, you should also familiarise yourself with the public transport system. It could put you at risk if you are wandering around lost in the late hours of the night, particularly if you are a woman. Our city has a fairly good public transportation system, but not all of it operates necessarily to late hours. For this reason, you can avail yourself of the special late-night buses known as night birds, which operate along most major routes. Again, collect one of the brochures on the table here for the night bird timetables. Finally, if you do feel there is an emergency, you can dial 000. However, this does not take you through to a police station, but rather an operator. This operator will question you as to the nature of the problem and then send your call through to the relevant department, police, fire or ambulance, as the situation demands. This may take up valuable time, and for this reason we suggest that you find the emergency number of the nearest main station to where you live. This will speed up the process should you need police services in the event of a serious problem. Having said all this, let me remind you once again that this is a very safe city and we don't expect any problems to occur. Yet, it always pays to be prepared.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
On the same subject as being prepared for problems, it is a fact that the police cannot cover every part of the city at all times of the day. Thus, it is advisable for you to take some precautions and be prepared for any problems which may occur. There are less safe areas which you may inadvertently find yourself in and, through no fault of your own, be faced with difficulties. In this respect, some people advise that women in particular carry mace or pepper spray, which can be sprayed into the eyes of an assailant. However, please be informed that these are illegal and consequently cannot be purchased, constituting, as they do, an attack weapon. On that same theme, any knives or small arms, while perhaps being legal in your country, are illegal here and must not be carried on your person. One thing you can carry, however, is a personal siren. In the advent of a problem, you just push a button and the siren will sound loudly, drawing such attention that any assailant almost invariably flees immediately from the scene. Moving on, you may wish to stay out late, to have fun or see the sights of this city at night, and we do not necessarily discourage that. However, we do advise that you confine yourself to areas that have sufficient street lighting or illumination. In the course of your activities, you may well meet strangers, but if this happens under clearly lit areas, visible to everyone in the vicinity, statistics prove that in almost all cases nothing will go wrong, particularly if you carry your siren. Above all, the greatest rule is simply to exercise discretion and intelligence when you go about your business. All the rules that I have given are simply based on this, and by following them all, your stay here will be both enjoyable and safe.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a student called Jerry discussing a pedagogy course with his tutor. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Jerry, how did it go with preparing your lessons? Is there anything you would like to discuss?
Well, this is actually the first time that I have ever taught in an elementary classroom. After 8 years of learning pedagogy, I want to practice what I've learned in an instructive manner. But I'm a bit stuck right now. You know, the topic I want them to research is a bit hard for pupils. I'm afraid that they won't be able to handle it on their own. So I need new ideas on designing more effective teaching methods. Mr. Carter, do you have any suggestions?
Well, you should probably read this book called Professional Learning, written by J.K. Simmons. He is a professor who just transferred here last semester, but is already popular amongst the students for his creative teaching methods. There is an extensive range of learning approaches mentioned in the book, including approaches for team research, which might be helpful to you.
You mean dividing the students into groups to do research? I've never thought of this before. How does it work?
Professor Simmons has already demonstrated how efficient this approach can be. Basically, it aims to increase cooperation between students so they can present the results in a collaborative fashion. It helps them to develop their own voice and perspective.
I'll check out the book as soon as possible. It seems I can borrow some of the essential concepts and work them into my course design.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 24 to 30.
Well, I was thinking maybe I could use both observation and non-observation as a part of my teaching methodology. Could you take a look at my teaching plan?
Sure. What kind of observational methods do you have in mind?
For the observational part, I intend to include two approaches. First, the pupils can assess each other's behavior. I feel that reviewing fellow students through criteria-based reference evaluation allows constructive feedback. It can also improve their understanding of the subject material.
That's a smart move for a large class that would be hard to observe all by yourself. Also, you might want to get the feedback from several different individuals rather than just one. So how do you plan to carry out the peer assessments?
Oh, every pupil will be required to write a diary, which includes group projects, presentations, and in-class discussions. They'll put down their remarks. I'll collect them on a regular basis, which can also help me see whether they can keep up or not.
Good. What else do you intend to do?
Besides that, I also plan to do video recording. I've already purchased a camera, just in case I miss anything important. I can go back and review their performances anytime I want.
Would you record every in-class activity?
No, I'll just keep track of an in-class simulation, which would require every pupil to fully participate. Students will act as members of a city council meeting, discussing issues like whether or not prohibition should be instated in the United States.
This kind of teaching method is both inspiring and challenging. I can't wait to see how yours works out. Do send me a copy of the assessment afterwards, will you?
No problem.
So, what do you have in mind for the non-observational approaches?
Well, my plan is to quantify the statistics. Numbers do not lie. It is the most direct way to measure their performance. See how well they've learned.
Where does the data come from?
I'll evaluate the test results, including the midterm, final exam, and pop quizzes, which would only take up about 40% of the overall assessment.
Sounds like a lot of tests and assignments. Please remember that you don't want to wear out your students. Keeping them engaged is the key to efficient learning. Once they are exhausted, they just stop trying.
Oh, I haven't thought about that. You are right. I don't want to frighten them with tons of assignments and exams. I'll make note of that. Thanks for the advice.
I remember last time you mentioned questionnaires, right?
That's true, but it is not for my students. In fact, they have to design their own questionnaires and choose the respondents using the internet. As a complement of other teaching activities, it would deepen the creative learning process.
Is that all?
Oh, the pupils will have to conduct interviews of their own, and for this, they get to choose anyone they like, including relatives, friends, and acquaintances to answer the questions.
Seems to me that you have figured out most of your teaching methods, but you still need to polish some of the activities.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about animals. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listen carefully to the lecture and answer questions 31 to 40.
In today's lecture, I'm going to talk about avoiding predation. What does that mean, I hear you say? Well, you probably know the word predator. I'm sure you've all seen Predator the movie. Well, a predator is any animal that hunts and kills another animal. That animal, and I was going to say that smaller animal, but it's not always the case, is the prey. An owl, for example, is a predator, and a mouse is its prey. A lion is a predator, and a much bigger animal, a buffalo, for example, is its prey. So when I say avoiding predation, what I mean is not being caught and eaten. For many small animals, not being caught and eaten is pretty much a full-time job. Many animals that are predators themselves may be the prey of another, usually bigger animal. This is what we popularly call the food chain. So, how do animals avoid predation? Well, they have what we call defense mechanisms. These are ways in which the species has adapted over time to give it an advantage over its predators. Any adaptation of this kind increases the species' chances of survival. Over time, species that have not adapted, that is, developed some sort of defense mechanism, have met with extinction. There are various forms of defense. The first is probably very obvious, and that's speed. Predators can't feed on what they can't catch. Running away is a very effective defense mechanism, as some of you can probably remember from primary school. Flight is even more effective. Species which have developed the ability to fly over time have an enormous advantage. Far more birds would be a meal out in the wild if they couldn't fly. The second mechanism is protective coloration. You might hear the word camouflage used too, but I personally find that too simple a term when it comes to the animal kingdom. Protective coloration includes a number of slightly varied mechanisms within the overall term. Some animals blend in with their background. A chameleon is a good example. It sits on a tree and it looks like the branch of that tree. Butterflies have what we think of as beautiful patterns, not to be beautiful, but to confuse and warn off potential assailants. They blend in with the flowers around them, but may also look like something else. Some butterflies have patterns that look like huge eyes, and a would-be predator is scared off. There are all sorts of stories about how the zebra got its stripes, and not many people really know what the stripes are there for. Well, that type of coloration is called dazzle camouflage. A zebra stands out when alone and stationary, but when zebras move rapidly in a herd, their stripes create motion dazzle, a confusing, flickering mass to the eye of a lion or cheetah that might be giving chase. Selecting a target becomes far more difficult. Now, of course, animals are caught. They're frequently caught, but that might not mean the game's up. Some animals make themselves difficult or horrible to eat. Hedgehogs have sharp spines that deter a predator from tucking in even when it's captured its prey. The predator is very likely to give up when a spine gouges an eye or gets lodged in its throat. Numerous species of creature, turtles or snails for example, have developed a tough outer shell that makes it almost impossible to devour. One of my favorite creatures is the skunk, which emits a repulsive smell on being cornered, enough to send any attacker herring back into the undergrowth. In a similar way, some sea-dwelling mollusks can emit an ink cloud that fills the surrounding water, concealing it from a predatory fish that may be circling. There are frogs that go one step further. They're so poisonous that even if a predator does try and eat them, it'll probably keel over and drop dead first. Now, you'll probably be surprised, but I'm going to go on to talk about plants. Yes, many plants have defense mechanisms in exactly the same way as animals. You've probably all been stung by a nettle at some time.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.